Hey everybody, welcome to Drive-Thru-Review 310. Today we're going to talk about Dead of Winter. This is a new game from Plaid Hat Games. It is the first in supposedly a line of Crossroads games. Now this was recently released at Gen Con and is kind of starting to trickle out about now. On its surface, Dead of Winter is a zombie survival horror game, but there's really quite a bit more to it than that, and that actually is very much a secondary piece of the game. Now what players are going to be doing is they're going to select a scenario. There's 10 possible scenarios in the game. I will make a quick comment here. The first scenario, we need more samples, is awful. I hate that scenario. I've played it a few times and I've played a couple of the other scenarios a couple of times, and definitely don't play this scenario for the first time. I just really hate the victory condition. Basically what it is you have to kill a certain number of zombies. Every time you kill a zombie, you roll a die to see if you extracted some sample out of it. Just kind of really basic and milquetoast, not very fun. Now the other scenarios are great, so I would say, maybe for your first game, play this scenario, I guess, but I would say just go ahead and skip it and play one of the more interesting scenarios. There are a variety of scenarios. Sometimes you're trying to collect food, or trying to collect fuel for heat, you're just trying to withstand a bunch of zombies coming after you and trying to hold your ground. Now the mechanics of a game turn are very straightforward. Everybody's going to roll some dice. You're going to take a couple of possible actions, usually moving around from location to location, attacking zombies, barricading locations, maybe searching a variety of locations. But the true heart of the game is in the secret objectives and in the Crossroads cards. Now, as I said earlier, everybody has a main objective that you're trying to complete as a group, as a cooperative group. But each player is also dealt a secret objective. Now, if you fail the main group objective, everybody loses, but only players that also accomplish their secret objective are going to win. So it's possible to have multiple winners and multiple losers. Now, on top of the basic secret objectives, you also have objectives that mark you as the betrayer. What betrayers are trying to do, they also have their own little personal objective, but they also want to see the main objective fail. Now the game comes with a variety of modes and kind of variants that you can play with. You can play pure co-op and not have any of the betrayer objectives. You could also increase the frequency of the betrayer objectives. Now I would say, for my money, the best way to play this game is with the increased frequency of betrayer objectives. Normally you deal out 2 objectives per player and then you throw in a betrayer, so that, I don't know what the ratio is, but the calculation there is that you probably won't have a betrayer objective. Now the other increased scenario is you deal 1 regular card and then 1 betrayer objective. So if you have 4 players, you've got 5 cards. One of those is a betrayer. You shuffle those up and deal them out. Now I've played games where we've had a betrayer, where we haven't had a betrayer. The games are much less fun, in my opinion, if you don't have a betrayer. So I would say just go for it. I would even try it. We haven't actually played it this way, but I would say make it so there's a betrayer no matter what. Now it's cool because some of your, your personal objectives, you may not be a betrayer, but people are going, what are you doing? Why are you acting so funny? Because maybe you have an objective to hoard a bunch of food or make sure that there's a certain number of survivor characters out on the board by the time the game ends. And so they might think you're the betrayer anyway. But for my money, from my experience, I would say you got to throw that betrayer in there. That really keeps it nice and going. But also there's a variant where you can play just co-op, and if you play 2 players, you can play just co-op without any secret objectives. I don't like that at all. I don't like playing the pure co-op. I would say just avoid that. If you're going to get this game to play it as a 2-player game or as just a co-op, I mean, there's so many better games that are just a straight co-op. Now, that sounds like I'm throwing darts at the game. I'm definitely not. I would stay away from that. The game really is going to shine once you have the betrayer, and people, have played the game a couple of times, and you get into this kind of the subtleties of the different secret objectives, and the betrayers trying to not show their true form too early and all that kind of good stuff. In addition to your secret objectives and the main objectives, each round is going to present a new crisis card. So you might need to recover some medicine or some fuel or some other basic stuff like that, or else you're going to lose morale if you don't actually achieve that sort of temporary crisis. And if your morale ever hits 0, then you lose. The other thing that you're going to be dealing with each turn are the Crossroads cards. Now, on your turn, the player to your right is going to actually draw a Crossroad card. They're going to read a trigger. And if you don't trigger whatever the trigger may be for the Crossroad card, nothing's going to happen. But if you do, they're going to stop you, stop the action, and then it's going to present to you a choice or even a vote for all of the players at the table. And these sometimes will have to do with your main objective. Sometimes it'll be sort of like a little subplot But this is really an amazing part of the game. You know, a lot of these co-ops, they have event cards and things like that built into the game. But I really like how these are done, and you can't stress enough how interesting of an idea this is. And there's a huge stack of these cards. You know, they could print more and, you know, add these, and you can just keep your same 10 objectives. So it gives them a lot of flexibility in the future. So on a player's turn, they're going to get dice equal to the number of characters they control plus 1. You roll all the dice. Some of the actions that you can take require dice. So depending on which character you're activating, you can attack zombies. Every time you move to a location or attack a zombie, you've got to roll the exposure die. That may give you wounds. You can build barricades. You can even attract zombies if you want. Now, the reason you might do that if you're a good guy is to get zombies off of somewhere where they're really starting to pile up and, you know, characters are in danger of dying. Now, one thing you're going to be doing a lot of is searching the various locations. You got the police station, the school, a library, hospital, etc. And there's certain goods and items that are in each of the locations that are more likely. So you're more likely to find medicine and fuel at the hospital, for example, whereas at the police station, you're more likely to find guns, etc. Now, you can find other survivors to add to your group. Everybody starts with 2 survivors in their group, and through the course of the game you may get helpless survivors, which all they do is suck up all your food. But the searching is going to be a big part of the game. Now, you're going to start with a starting hand of cards, and these are going to be items like medicine and food and fuel. But these cards basically have 2 uses. One, you can play the card for the text effect. The other thing you can do is put them face down into the crisis contribution pile. Now, as I said earlier, each round we're going to have a crisis, and we're going to need to have a certain number of medicine or food, or else we're going to have some nasty effect like losing morale or some other effect. At the end of the round, you're going to reveal all of the crisis cards, and then any card that is not the type that the crisis wants is actually going to reduce the amount. So if we needed 4 food for the current round, and there was, let's say, 4 food and 2 fuel for some reason, that would, we count 1, 2, 3, 4 food, but the 2 fuel is actually going to reduce our count. So we actually technically have only 2 food, so we would fail. We would also now know that there's a betrayer in our mix. So the one thing to keep in mind about contributing to the crisis card is on the bottom of the card, you have the location where it was from. So if you are the betrayer and you do this too early and you're the only one that's been to the gas station, and we know that, and you contribute that to the crisis pile, then you're going to rat yourself out really quickly. So you got to be very careful about that. And the starting items also have starter item on the bottom of that. So it keeps you from, you know, springing too early, you know, almost built into the game. But it's just one thing you got to be careful of. Now, there's some other things you need to consider at the end of the round. You're going to need to pay food, and you have to pay 2 food for every survivor, and that includes the helpless survivors at the colony. Anybody that's out and about at the gas station or wherever doesn't need food. And then you're going to go through and add zombies. You're going to add zombies to the colony based on every 2 survivors there, and then every survivor is going to trigger a zombie at one of the outer locations. Now, when you search, one thing that you can actually do on your turn is generate noise to search some more, because hey, you may be at the gas station, but guess what? There's no dang fuel on that deck. So you've got to attempt multiple search attempts within one action, and to do that you're going to generate noise. So for each noise token there at the end of the round, you've got to roll a die. A 1 to 3 is going to generate another zombie, a 4, 5, or 6, and you're okay. So one really cool thing to do is if you're the betrayer, you can say, oh gosh, we really need that fuel, really need that fuel. Didn't get it. And you're making all this noise and trying to trigger more zombies to make it, you know, more difficult for the survivors at that location to get away. Meanwhile, you drew, you know, 3 fuel. So that's an interesting technique, and one to be, you know, watched out for. Now, finally, the last thing I haven't talked about is you can actually call a vote on your turn to exile another player. Everybody's going to vote to do that. And if that vote to exile succeeds, then that player is actually going to draw a new exiled goal card, and their goal is going to change based on if they were the betrayer or not a betrayer. If you vote a second person out that wasn't actually a betrayer, then everybody loses. So that's basically how the game works. As I said earlier, the mechanics are very simple, very straightforward. You know, you move a guy here and there, you roll your dice, you take your couple of actions, you know, attacking zombies, building barricades, searching for a bunch of stuff, do a lot of searching. So underneath the cover of the gears there's not a lot there. But where the game really shines is those crossroads cards and those secret objectives. Now, the game that you're going to compare this a lot to is Battlestar Galactica, where you have a traitor and a betrayer. That's more of a team game because somebody is going to be the Cylon and other folks are not. This one has a little bit more going on in terms of that aspect where, yeah, I want everybody to win, but I also really want my personal objective to succeed, you know, even though there may not even be a betrayer in there. So that adds a kind of another element. And I've seen a few games try this, you know, over the last several years where you have, you know, multiple winners or somebody can, you know, only they can win, even though it's kind of a co-op, that whole thing. This is the only game I've ever played where it works. And now there's a lot other stuff going on just besides that whole betrayer and secret objective aspect. That though, you really got to hit that home because that's really the core of the game. If that's not going to do it for you, then, you know, avoid it. But it's really amazing that they've pulled this off because I think for a lot of time, I've heard a lot of people really want a game like that where you kind of seed the sow the seeds of distrust and all that kind of cool stuff. And this is really the first game and only game that succeeded at that. Now, in some of the details of the game, one thing that's really cool is they didn't go with miniatures and they went with these awesome standees that look just like the characters on the cards. You know, you can easily tell who's who, and they've really come to life. And I think you can't really oversell that. They did a great job with that. The crossroad cards themselves are hilarious. They present you with very thematic choices, like, you know, you run into some crazy old lady and, you know, do you help her or do you know, knock her out and take the food from her? And just a whole bunch of stuff. I don't even want to spoil anything more than that one card because it's really the coolest thing. And you want to give the card to somebody that's going to read it. They're going to get enthusiastic about the theme and really add flavor to that. Very interesting to me how they kind of interweave with your main basic objective, your main scenario that you're going to pick. So if you pick scenario 6 and you play it one day, then you play it again the next day, it's going to be quite different because the crossroad cards are going to either be sort of, you know, parallel, not really have anything to do with that, or sometimes it's going to seem like they really interwove themselves into that main scenario. So it's really like you're playing a different type of scenario because, you know, in this sort of theme, you always need food, you always need fuel and stuff like that. But, you know, now we're in episode 10 and yeah, we need food still, but now this other stuff has happened and it's made it stranger and different and more difficult. So a lot can be said about this game, and they are going to supposedly make, and the next one is going to be in space, like a Lost in Space type of theme. So it's going to be interesting to me from sort of a wonky perspective of, you know, what are the mechanics going to be? Are they going to have locations to search or aliens invading the spaceship or something? Because I don't think they necessarily need to do that. They can really, you know, tack on as simple or complex of a game as they really wanted, with the same core of a crossroads card, the secret objectives, the betrayers as the core, because it's really at its, like I said, at surface, really basic and simple, but the way that it's executed here on multiple levels, I think they did a good job with the core mechanics and all the details and things like that make it sort of a zombie game, you know, really come through. So definitely you got to recommend this game. It's a great game, Dead of Winter.